So the result of this fight was what most people expected. 70% of my audience picked Johnny Fischer to win by knockout. I said the most likely scenario would be Johnny Fischer knocking Alen Babic out inside 4 rounds. In the end, we didn't even get 1 minute. The fight was over in 36 seconds. I had hoped that Alen Babic would at least give us some entertainment while he was in there, as long as the fight lasted. But he had absolutely nothing. There was no head movement. He looked slow. He was a sitting duck. And Johnny Fischer figured that out very quickly, because the first right hand he threw at Alen Babic was partially blocked by Babic's left glove, but it managed to knock him off balance. And there was no counter in return. It took him a couple seconds to right himself, to get his balance back, and then proceed to march forward again. So that told Johnny Fischer right there that if he throws his right hand, he won't be punished for it. Babic ain't gonna get out the way, and whether it's blocked or whether it lands, there'll be no counter, because Babic is too off balance. So a few moments later, Johnny Fischer tries it again. This time, the right hand isn't blocked. It kind of grazes off Alen Babic's face, but once again, he's off balance, looks slow. Johnny Fischer anticipates there's not going to be any counters coming back at him, so he opens up. And as the punches start flying in, not once does Alen Babic attempt to move his head or get out the way. He just stands there, allowing the entire combination to hit him flush in the face. And down he goes. He does beat the referee's count, but he is in no position to continue, totally out of it. The referee does the right thing in stopping the fight. So there you go, Johnny Fischer, first round knockout of Alen Babic. I've been saying for a long time, long before the Rosansky fight, that Babic's punch resistance is looking as if it's deteriorating. I was saying long before the Rosansky fight that Babic looks like he's jaded. And so post-Rosansky, I can't understand how anyone would think that Babic would be any better. The probability is he was going to be worse. Going in there against a young heavyweight who's got loads of energy, who outweighs him by whatever it was, 24 pounds, faster than him, taller, longer reach. This was a fight designed to make Johnny Fischer look good. And it served its purpose because the Bosch army will be very happy about the result. Eddie Hearn's hyping it all up, saying that Johnny Fischer's now a world-level prospect. It's a very curious thing though, because I saw an interview with Eddie Hearn on Fight Week, and he said the same thing, that Johnny Fischer's a world-level prospect. But then when the interviewer asked him whether he thinks Johnny Fischer can ever get to world level, Eddie Hearn said, it's too early to say. Well, hang on. If you're saying he's a world-level prospect, surely that implies that you think he can get to world level. See, Eddie Hearn just likes saying stuff that sounds good, even if he doesn't necessarily believe it himself. Now, I know there are going to be some people in the comments, Johnny Fischer fans, asking me whether my mind has changed about Johnny Fischer after what he did to Alen Babic, because before the fight, I was saying that I think Johnny Fischer's a gimmick. I think he's a novelty fighter. So has my opinion on him changed now? Well, let's just look at this logically. 70% of my audience expected Johnny Fischer to knock out Alen Babic. I expected Johnny Fischer to knock out Alen Babic early, and that's what we got. So why would I change my mind if I got the result that I expected? How does that make sense? And how about this? Lucas Rosansky, a guy damn near 40 years old with, I think, no amateur experience, knocked out Alen Babic in 1 round. He did what Johnny Fischer did. Took a minute or so longer, but he got the same result. First round knockout of Alen Babic. Were you guys all jumping up and down saying, oh wow, Rosansky's amazing. He's going to conquer the heavyweight division. Never mind bridgerweight. Look, he just knocked out Babic in 1. And let's go further still. Rosansky, the guy who knocked out Babic in 1, was himself knocked out in 1 round recently by Lawrence Okolie. Does that mean that Okolie's now going to conquer the heavyweight division? Because he knocked out the guy in 1 round who knocked out Babic in 1 round. Why are we getting so carried away? Let's stay rooted in logic here. All Johnny Fischer has done is equal the result that Rosansky got over Alen Babic. So it tells us that Fischer is at least on the level of Rosansky. It doesn't mean he's not above the level of Rosansky. That remains to be seen. But he's at least on the level of Rosansky, who's not even a heavyweight. And again, just got chinned himself in 1 round by Lawrence Okolie. People are saying Johnny Fischer's got fast hands. I was saying that before the fight. This result against Alen Babic told me absolutely nothing about Johnny Fischer that I didn't already know. That's the point. It didn't tell us anything. Babic couldn't have made it easier for him. stood right in front of him, threw no counters whenever Johnny Fischer slung a right hand at him, no head movement. He did literally nothing. He posed no challenge to Johnny Fischer at all. We hoped he might, but he did nothing. So it tells us zero, zilch, nada. If you seriously think that even at English title level, against, let's say, the winner of Sol Dakers versus Adelaide, if you think they're just going to stand there and let Johnny Fischer tee off with those fast hands, with those combinations in the opening round, then you're very, very misguided. Even at English title level, fighters are going to be moving their head, moving their feet, using their jab to establish distance. These guys are as tall as Johnny Fischer, Sol Dakers and Adelaide. They're going to be throwing shots back at him, serious shots, giving Fischer something to think about. They're not just going to be sitting ducks, standing there with their chin hanging out, begging to be KO'd from the very first bell like Alen Babic was. No, they're going to give him a lot more to think about and a lot more to deal with than Alen Babic was ever going to. They're simply not going to give Johnny Fischer the opportunity to let go fast combinations like that, because he's going to have to be thinking about how to avoid their big punches. And it's far less straightforward than staying away from a plodding, little, slow Alen Babic. Johnny Fischer looks very, very novice-y. The way he holds his hands, the way he shapes up, he's very upright. His footwork, in previous fights, I've seen the way he reacts when punches are thrown at him. Very, very novice-y. This is a guy who needs years and years of work before you'd even dream of putting him in there against a top 15 heavyweight in the world. He needs years of work. Johnny Fischer's defense is so open. It's so amateurish and open. So I'll reiterate, yes, he has certain attributes that are promising, that can be developed. The hand speed is there, the punching power is there. But his game overall is very, very raw, very novice-y. Now, some people might turn around and say, well, what about Deontay Wilder? He had terrible technique and he made it all the way to being a world champion and reigning for several years. Deontay Wilder proved that despite having limited technique, he was a tremendous puncher, ungodly punching power. Johnny Fischer hasn't proven himself to have power like that. Furthermore, with Deontay Wilder, he won a bronze medal in the Olympics. So even prior to turning pro, he'd already proved that he could actually win at a certain level. Johnny Fischer doesn't have that kind of amateur background. So we don't know if he can win at a certain level. With Wilder, we knew that he could. With Fischer, we simply don't. The level of opposition that he's fought has been very, very low. We've never seen Fischer in a real fight. And so until we see him in a real fight, we see him answer some questions in a fight. Only then will I be able to say, okay, maybe he's a bit better than I thought at first. But we haven't seen that. There have been some people over the past 6 months or so saying that Johnny Fischer should fight Moses Italma. Moses Italma is light years ahead of Johnny Fischer in terms of development as a fighter. Light years ahead. Even though he's still at the prospect stage as a pro, if you look at his technique, the way he shapes up and moves around the ring, the way he throws his shots, he is light years ahead of Johnny Fischer. There isn't a chance in hell that Eddie Hearn would put Johnny Fischer anywhere near Moses Italma. Frank Warren would be more keen on that fight, far more keen on that fight than Eddie Hearn is. Obviously, Frank Warren promotes Italma. So that's just not realistic at all. Italma has been professional for less time than Johnny Fischer, I believe. Fischer turned pro quite a bit earlier than Italma. But Italma's already ahead of Johnny Fischer in terms of the level of opposition. He's been fighting much tougher guys than the guys they've been putting Johnny Fischer in with. So his next fight is against Mariusz Wach. Mariusz Wach has been in there against Klitschko, went the distance. Povetkin, I think that went nearly 12 rounds. Dylan White, of course, that went the distance. Fraser Clark, more recently, that went the distance. Martin Bacoli, so on and so forth. Mariusz Wach is a big guy, not a little blown up chubby cruiserweight like Alen Babic. No, a big guy. I think he's about 6'7", 6'8", Mariusz Wach. And he's teak tough. He's old, yes, but still very physically tough. Very experienced. Johnny Fischer hasn't fought anybody like that. That's who Moses Italma's fighting next. And prior to that, he beat Dovyachenko. You guys remember that? Dovyachenko's the guy who stopped Matty Harris, another young British heavyweight prospect. Dovyachenko took Matty Harris into deep waters and drowned him. Italma beat Dovyachenko at a canter. No problem at all. Comfortably. Was never slightly troubled in the fight. Johnny Fischer hasn't fought anybody as tough as Dovyachenko. In fact, that would be a good fight for Johnny Fischer. While they wait for the winner of Sol Dakers versus Adalai, if they're really going to take that, I think it depends on how good the winner looks. If the winner of that fight looks too good, Eddie Hearn's not going to put Johnny Fischer in with him. So in the meantime, I think Dobychenko will be a good fight for Johnny Fischer. See what he can do with him. Very tough journeyman. Very, very difficult to stop. In fact, I'm not sure he has been stopped yet. And he comes with ambition. He tries to win. We saw that, as I say, against Matty Harris. Alen Babic was a name, so the fight served its purpose in that regard. But a name for being what? A name for only ever being a gimmick fighter himself. That's all Alen Babic ever was a gimmick fighter. We all know that. Fun, yes. I enjoyed watching Alen Babic against these low-level fighters. It was fun, but nobody was under any illusions about what Alen Babic actually was. He was always just a gimmick fighter, as I think Johnny Fischer is. It's just that Johnny Fischer is a bigger, younger, fresher gimmick fighter than Alen Babic. So there you go. That's my take on the fight. I got nothing against Johnny Fischer. If he proves me wrong, he proves me wrong. But I've just not seen anything of him to convince me that he's more than I currently think he is. So I'll leave it there. Are you sick and tired of the mainstream mindset? Does the dogmatic conformity and pathological ignorance have you tearing your hair out in frustration? Then don't be alone. Come and join our brotherhood on Patreon. We stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. You'll gain access to my weekly topical podcast, where we take more deep dives than Jacques Cousteau on an endless variety of subjects. There's also videos, interviews, live Q&As, as well as a vast back catalogue of previous episodes, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen via the Patreon app or download in high-quality MP3. Connect with myself and hundreds of other members in our Element chat group. There's no contract, no commitment, you can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a Mickey D's McMuffin. Just head to my Patreon page via the link below this video and select the tier called the Brotherhood of Reason. I'll see you over there.